Olá, boa tarde. Sejam bem-vindos a esta sessão, de algum modo complementar daquilo que aconteceu às 3h30 no grande auditório e que se vai prolongar, não exatamente repetir, mas prolongar à noite, na sessão das 21h30. Já agora deixem-me recordar que, portanto, acabámos de ver no grande auditório As Aventuras de Tintin, o Segredo do Licorne, de Steven Spielberg, em versão 3D, dobrada em português, e teremos a versão inglesa em 3D às 21h30. Talvez seja importante lembrar algo de muito básico que tem a ver com o facto de termos este evento em torno de Tintin no âmbito da Capital Europeia da Cultura, Guimarães 2012. Guimarães 2012, o que quer dizer que 2011 é já um ano de ação para nós e de programação no cinema e, de facto, em todas as áreas. E a apresentação de Tintin envolveu ou envolve para nós 2 ou 3 fatores que nos são bastante caros. Primeiro que tudo, o facto de termos um espetáculo, um grande espetáculo, que faz, por assim dizer, a ponte entre as gerações. Depois, o termos um filme que, pelas suas próprias características digitais e em 3D, tem a ver com componentes específicas da programação e da produção da área de cinema de Guimarães 2012. E, finalmente, talvez seja o fator decisivo, o facto de estarmos a lidar com uma referência da cultura popular europeia, a criação de Hergé, Tintin, que de facto se tem mantido para além das gerações, que transcendeu épocas e que, como se prova, mantém uma atualidade cultural e de espetáculo fortíssima. Precisamente por causa disso, dirigimos um convite a Yves Février, que vos apresento desde já, do Museu Hergé de Bruxelas, que é alguém envolvido com o museu já há muitos anos, que teve um papel de diretor na criação do site tintin.com e que, precisamente pelo seu trabalho no museu, pelo seu trabalho como professor, tem uma relação muito forte e muito sistemática com o digital. E convidámo-lo justamente pedindo-lhe que ele fizesse aqui um pouco o ponto da situação dessa herança cultural, histórica, desenhada e filmada de Tintin, ao mesmo tempo percebendo um pouco a sua relação com o próprio filme, no sentido em que, e ele poderá explicar-vos um pouco isso, ele trabalhou com grande regularidade em todas as relações do Museu Hergé com a produção do filme e, além disso, como ele nos disse, quando chegou ontem, esteve intimamente ligado a toda a logística daquela que foi a antestreia mundial do filme há 2 dias em Bruxelas. Yves, welcome to Guimarães.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure and an honor to have you here. Well, we have seen Tintin in the big screen, and we would like very much to hear you speaking a little about the heritage of Tintin and also the present of Tintin. So
Okay.
The word is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to have invited me to this place in Guimarães. I didn't know this place. I've been in Portugal before, but not Guimarães. So I'm really pleased to be here and to give you a little bit more information about Hergé, about the work we do, about the future. So don't hesitate to interrupt me if you need any additional information. It's also a kind of interactive exercise. So decide to present my conference in 3 parts. I would say the part 1 would be a little bit about Hergé, what he's doing, what kind of man we are talking about, what are the most important steps in his life. And afterwards I will present basically what was on the screen before this marvelous film of Steven Spielberg, because there were a great number of tentative on screen, small screen, big screen, and I just want to remind you all these audiovisuals tentative. And then the third part, I will explain to you a little bit about the making of the movie. Although I'm not one of the guys who worked on the film, I've approached several times the team. They just visit Brussels, they learned from us, they took some documentation, and in that respect, Moulin Sarr, who is the company who handled the right and granted the right to Steven Spielberg and Peter Jackson, we just published a book with Weta. Weta is the company of Peter Jackson. We just published a book which is called The Art Book, and to be honest, this book is really a pearl. It's magnificent because it gives you a lot of information about the making of the movie. So I will present briefly that book, and then I will speak about the story of Steven Spielberg when he contacted Moulin Sarr, not Moulin Sarr, but when he contacted Casterman, the publisher, and Hergé in 1983, and then the story afterwards. So regarding Hergé, although he's a genius, Hergé it's an ordinary man, you know. So it's a man who worked a lot, at least in the first part of his life. And if I can summarize a little bit the most important milestone of his life, I would say that first of all the birth, you know, it's always important, the birth in 1907. Then the second step is the school. It's a secondary school, because it's a school that I visited quite recently, and which is called Saint Boniface. It's a Catholic school, and in that school he experimented the Boy Scout, and the Boy Scout also, of course, has a great influence on the work of Hergé and on the ADN or the DNA, the DNA of Tintin. All the value of the Boy Scout are in Tintin. The courageous, the fidelity or the trust, and also the fact to accomplish everything you promise. So to comply with the will, to comply with and to act in accordance with your willingness and with what you have promised. Then a third step is, of course, the meeting with the abbot called Abbé Wallet. This person was an abbot and was managing a newspaper in Brussels called The 20e siècle. There is a reference to that newspaper in the movie of Spielberg at the beginning of the movie. And this abbé has a great influence on Hergé. Don't bear in mind that Hergé, at that time when he joined the newspaper, was it was in 1925, if I remember correctly. So he was 22 years old. He was quite young. And then he worked for, he created with the abbot a supplement for children called Le Petit 20e, so the small Petit 20e. And he took the direction of the Petit 20e, and that's where Tintin was created in 1929. Just to let you know that the first Tintin adventures were published on a weekly basis. It was 2 pages in the supplement the supplement we are talking about, and these 2 pages were published every week. And then afterward, it took, let's say, 1 year, more or less 1 year, to bind all this weekly publication to create an album. So the first album, that was the Tintin in the Land of the Soviet, was published in 1930. From 1930, the abbot also allowed Hergé to meet his wife. So the abbot presented Germaine, is her first name, presented to Hergé his future wife. So that gives you the influence that the abbot could have about Hergé. And it also explains the fact that the 2 first albums, even the first 3 albums, Tintin America, Tintin in Congo, and Tintin in the Land of the Soviet, have been more or less commissioned by the abbot. He asked and instructed, if I could use that word, Hergé to create a book about the adventure of Belgium, not really the adventures of Tintin, but the adventures of Belgium through Tintin in Congo. Congo was at that time, like it happens also for Portugal, but it was a colonia very important colonia of Belgium. I wouldn't say personally myself that this album is a colonial, it's an apology of colonia. It's more a book about proselytism. So this book, really the abbot wants to show the work accomplished by the missionary and the Catholic Church in Congo. That's the main object of this book. And of course, the first book, Tintin in the Land of the Soviet, the Catholics were fearing the red communism, and again, and that was the first mission of Hergé, was to make a book denouncing the communism and what they did in Russia at that time, in Soviet Union, sorry. So between 1930 and 1940, Hergé started really working like hell and like a slave, I would say. He worked really hard. You have to know that Hergé created more or less 10 family characters. I can give you an example here, just to show you the diversity of his work. In fact, Tintin has a kind of precedent who was called Totor. Here you have pictures of Totor. And that's really the first character. He looks like Tintin, but he's not Tintin. It's a Boy Scout. And what is really interesting in these pages of Totor is to present how Hergé was thinking his work. You can see on the top of the image that he was presenting his cartoon as like a producer of a movie, like if he would have a studio himself, which is called United Rovers. So Hergé was really, from the beginning, he was really inspired by a movie. And for him, he created his own movie on paper, in a way. And you can easily find that when you are reading the Tintin adventure and to see his influence on the cinema. That's another character which is called Flup and Nénès. I hope you can see it. And that was created in 1929, so it was really contemporary to the Tintin adventures. This is another character which is called Fred and Mile. It's a comic strip created in 1931, just after Tintin, and Hergé drew it for the Catholic newspaper Mon Avenir. Here, that's also another character created for her special department store in Brussels at that time called Innovation. It's very famous in Brussels. It's still existing, in fact, this store department. Probably less brilliant than before. And again, this adventures was created by Hergé again. Here, it's another character which is called Joëzette. This is it's a quite famous character also. It's one of the top three of Hergé with Quick and Flupke. And the adventure of Joëzette is in 5 volumes, 5 books, and has been created in 1935. And I would say the ambience of this character is completely the reverse of Tintin, because here we are talking about a family. We have a boy and a girl with a monkey, and we have the father. So this atmosphere, this world is completely different from Tintin, who has no father, no family, no brother and sister, and so on. And we could say that Hergé was creating a number of different type of character, like a lab, like a laboratory, try to test the market in a way, and to see what character will supersede the others. And of course, Tintin after become the most popular one. An example of the genius of Hergé, and to show you how his work, and to show you that his influence by the movie and the movement, because a number of experts are saying that the Tintin in the Land of the Soviet is probably a work which has been made when he was quite young, and this book is not that interesting. It was a kind of criticism, a simple criticism of the communists. But personally, I would not agree, because we just made a movie with the BBC, and that film will be broadcast on BBC 2 on the 30th of October, with a great reporter of BBC. And this documentary is talking about Tintin in the Land of the Soviet, and we discover a number of things. And what is the genius part of this book, I think, is already the movement, because there is something very important in the adventures of Tintin, is the movement, the presence, the omnipresence of the movement. It's quite rare to have Tintin not being in a movement. And in general, it is in movement from the left to the right, of course. And in that album, you can already feel, although the storytelling, it's true to say that the storytelling is rather poor, and it's a succession of gag and action. But you have the movement. It's like a child, a child is probably walking before talking and thinking, and this album is like this. It's first the movement, and the storytelling will come later, very likely, I would say, in The Cigar of the Pharaoh. That's really the album where the storytelling is starting being very well documented and properly made. So I will give you the 2 panels that Hergé liked the most. This is one of the 2 panels that Hergé liked. So he was interviewed by a journalist, and the journalist was saying, what panels, what image you prefer? He mentioned only 2 images. This one and another one, and I will explain why. What is very interesting in this is a panel from the crab with the golden claws. And you have one we call Berber or Berber. And you have different Berber, like a team in a way, but in fact is more or less the same individual in different position, you see? So he's laying first, then he's on his knee, then he's starting moving and go to the back, and then he's running. Basically, it's the same character in different position. So in one image, he gives action. You see, and that's why he liked it most this panel. And the other one, just to explain again the magic of the album, and also the different reading from the readers, and that's also the magic of the album. Here it's the second panel that he liked the most, because it's a kind of triangle. So ad hoc is really the base, and then you have the triangle going. Here. And it explains in one panel all the past situation. So when you are reading this panel, you can see and you can understand easily from where Tintin, the Thompson, ad hoc are coming from. They are coming from the boat. You can also understand what they have done. They have taken a small boat coming to the beach, and you see no ad hoc landing on the ground. So in one panel, the reader can understand all the action in one panel. So thereafter, the first 9 adventures were made in black and white. In other words, the pagination of these comic books were totally different from the existing book of today, because the format of the existing book of today, it's 62 pages, and at that time the black and white version were in 100 pages, more than 100 pages. So during the war, the things were changing a lot for Hergé. Of course, you are maybe aware of the fact that Hergé was tagged as a collaborator. You have, and all these criticisms are coming quite often from England, funny enough. And before judging that element and to qualify Hergé as a collaborator, I think we need to be careful, because you need to understand the history of Belgium. You need to understand the position of the king at that time, and the position of the king was rather clear. We like or we don't like. That's another, of course, that's another judgment. But the king at that time say, we stay in Belgium and we try to live there under the occupancy of Germany. And of course there were a division in that respect. There were a number of people who left Belgium to go to England. The king remains in Belgium, and Hergé decided to follow the king in that respect and to continue to work. I think you can criticize the fact that he was working for a newspaper which has been controlled by the occupant at that time. I think that's a fair critic, knowing that other people were in the resistance. I think that's really the key element and the key weakness of Hergé, and I think he really faced his conscience after the war. In that respect, but I think Hergé was, in a way, quite egoist in that respect, and he wants to continue his creation and want to continue drawing, although the country was in war. So there was a shortage of paper, and of course that changed a lot his position. He was obliged during the war to change the format, so to replace the 100 page to 62 pages. Also, the color was coming, so during the war they were able to use and to start with the color. And of course, it changed a little bit the scenario and the way that Hergé was working, because before he was quite, I wouldn't say politically engaged in this album, but he was denouncing sometimes, or he was really related to the actuality and to the news of that time. If you look at the Cep of Autocar, clearly it was based on the story of Albania invaded by Italia, and then was also a demonstration of the Anschluss, the invasion by Germany of Austria. Just to give you also an example of the position of Hergé between the war, it's a drawing which is not very known, but I think Hergé take a lot of risk by drawing this, just to show you. So you can see that's another family character. That family character is called Mr. Bellum. And Mr. Bellum is definitely an anti-Hitler series. Its 4 stories were published in the neutral weekly newspaper L'Ouest from December 7, 1939 to 29 December 1939. At that time, it took a lot of risk, if you know a little bit the history of Hitler and what he did between 1933 and 1940. And you can see in the last panel that Mr. Bellum is writing on the wall that Hitler is completely crazy. This drawing is displayed in the museum also. So it changed the way of working during the war, and he start really also gaining in confidence, and I think the best album has been produced during the war, as far as I'm concerned. Then after the war, Hergé, he met during the war another comic author which is called Jacobs. I don't know if you know him, Blake and Mortimer. And he started working with Jacobs, and Jacobs was his friend at that time and remained his friend for the rest of the life. Of course, Jacobs make his own path and his own life after, but they have started working together starting in 1943. Then, after the war, it's clear that Hergé got some troubles. He was annoyed during a certain time. Finally, he has not been condemned for his participation to this newspaper. He was able to rebound thanks to a person which is called Mr. Leblanc, among others. And Mr. Leblanc was the creator of the Journal Tintin. Donc, it's a weekly magazine for children, and this magazine was called Journal Tintin. And he started in 1946, and it was a great success. And of course, it was not only about Tintin, but other characters. And this newspaper disappeared in the 1990. Then it's clear that Hergé he faced a lot of challenge. He faced a lot of work. He was close to a burning, I would say, and he escaped sometimes. Early in 1950, he left Belgium to go to Switzerland to see a shrink, to see a shrink, and he started to have problems in his couple, and he also created the studios in 1950, really at the beginning of the diptych, The Moon. He realized that he cannot work alone anymore, and he created really what we call the Studio Hergé. So, and at that time it was quite revolutionary to have an author of a comic book to create a team behind him and to work really on a studio. Don't forget that he was beside that, he was also doing a lot of advertising works, like like an advertising agency for other people. That kind of work you can see in the museum. He was doing that already in the 30s, just as an accessory of his main work. Then in the 50s, clearly there was a kind of dilemma for him to leave his wife, Germaine, who was, of course, like a partner. I think I see Germaine, at least not at the early stage, but afterward, more as a business partner than a real woman with whom Hergé was in love. Clearly, not necessarily in the beginning, because Hergé was really in love in the beginning, I'm sure. But afterwards, it's clear that Hergé was not satisfied with his relationship. But for him, it was a nightmare to separate, because he has always his soul as a Boy Scout, and to infringe the promise and to default, it's really a shame for him. So he was really embarrassed by that, and that's the reason why he visited a shrink in Geneva or in Switzerland. I think it was in Lausanne, or it was definitely in Switzerland, but I couldn't remember the city. And at that time he was also working on Tibet. So the whiteness you see in Tibet, Hergé was dreaming about, he faced the devil, and he was really questioned by this white color. And that's why you have this white color in the album of Tibet. And then the work, of course, after the 50s and the end of the 50s, you can clearly understand that Hergé was less interested in working. He was more interested by the life. He enjoyed more the life. You can see that in the different interview he's doing. At that time, you start feeling somebody who enjoyed the life more than all the work he done in the past. And thanks to Fanny, I think this person hopefully could live a little bit and work less. For example, if you look at Tintin and the Picaros, I think it took more or less 16 years to produce that book. Just to understand the gap and the timing process for the last books.